Okay, you're live.
Call a special meeting to order of March 11th, 2024 at 9 o'clock. I'm going to start with the land acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the town of Winnipeg Beach is located on First Nations Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Dakota and the Dani people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties made on these territories. We dedicate ourselves to move forward with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration to make Manitoba an inclusive and accessible place for everyone who lives here.
Be it hereby resolved, the agenda for the March 11th, 2024 special meeting of council be approved as presented.
Can I get a mover, please? Councilor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councilor Kozlowski. All in favor? Carried.
Item 4.1, canteen lease expiration for council discussion.
Okay, I believe that everybody has documentation in front of you. The current lease in the canteen is going to be up in October 2024 of this year. So council has some decisions in front of us. We currently have a restaurant in there that I believe we tender out. Another option for us is having a canteen. And the difference between that is a canteen would be run by staff that we hire to have food available when we have programs there. Or we tender out for a restaurant to be there. And that would be, sort of a restaurant sort of working on its own and creating its own hours, its own menu, all those kinds of things. And so that's the first discussion that we need to have, is whether we want to have our own canteen or whether we want to tender out to a restaurant. And if we want to tender out to a restaurant, then we have to look at what our requirements are going to be.
Just a question on that, Madam Mayor, is having a canteen operation that has gone out to tender also an option? So we have a canteen, it runs as a canteen,
Yep.
Under the control of the recreation person responsible for the building? Okay, so that is another option.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
So I trusting that everybody had an opportunity to look at the background information on this. We've had different discussions on this, so I'd like to hear from people what their initial thoughts are in terms of whether we should be looking at our own canteen or whether we should be looking at a restaurant in there. I'll also refer you to the Winnipeg Beach Recreation Center future use proposal that also spoke to food being available in the canteen, and that was a group of community community members who were interested in our rec center. And some of the things that they were asking for in the rec center. And I believe what they had said is to reopen the canteen on a published schedule and provide deli-style canteen or cafeteria that features offering consistent with the value of promoting healthy living. For example, wraps, muffin juice, veggies, juices, milks, as opposed to fried or fast food. So that's part of our consideration is feedback from the public. But there's other considerations also that we have to take into consideration. So I'd like to hear from council in terms of what your initial thoughts are. Councillor Houle, Councillor Jarvis.
I don't really want to go first, but
Well, someone has to.
Then I'll go first. I think we should tender it out and offer the option to negotiate current contract. My concern has always been that it costs us too much money to operate it under the present conditions. So we either increase and we have to increase the current rent
Oh, for sure,
substantially.
for sure.
Now, in that, we offer the current tenant to accept a renegotiation contract with a new price. And if failing that, then we just go to tender.
Okay. So, I mean, we can figure out the process later. I think at this point, just looking at whether we want to have a canteen to have food available for participants during our programming or whether we don't, because there's implications for either side, right? So you're suggesting that you would like to see a restaurant in there as opposed to a canteen?
Again, when you tender it out, it says canteen or restaurant services, so either or, like, it could be either one. When you look at the actual template, it says when you tender it out, you can go either negotiate the current contract or issue a new tender, and under both of those as canteen services and or restaurant services. So somebody might want it as a canteen. Any of the canteens that I've encountered now are still run by the municipality. So example, take the Access Center, West St. Paul still runs that. It's infrequent that they have it. But when they do have it, it's run and fully as a canteen by the West St. Paul employees.
Right. So I guess the question that I'd like to start with is, do we want to see a canteen in there that is simply open when we have programming? Or do we want to have a restaurant in there that's open whenever they want to be open? Because some of the implications are, if it's a canteen that's tendered out, as you're suggesting, then we specify the hours. It'll only be during rec hockey or this time or this time. That means when there isn't those functions happening, other people can rent out that kitchen space for birthday parties, for socials, for weddings, for anything else, because it doesn't belong to anybody. So if it's a canteen, then there's restricted hours, only around programming. If it's a restaurant, we have no access to that kitchen. So that's the first question in my mind. Do we want a canteen, whether it's tendered out or run by us, or do we want a restaurant? That's the first question we have to answer. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, under most conditions, I mean, you would offer the current tenant the ability to renegotiate. So if you want to change how we look at it as a canteen and go back to a canteen, then again, you're stipulating that. You're saying, I don't want you to be a restaurant anymore, I want you to be a canteen. Theoretically, he should still have that option as a tenant that, I'll be a canteen and not a restaurant.
Okay. So this is separate from whoever's in there.
But I know, I understood that. But if you're saying that he's a restaurant right now, so you're changing it. You're changing it from a Ford to a Chrysler. You're saying you're no longer going to be a restaurant. It's going to be a canteen.
I understand that. And so as a council, we have to make a decision about what we feel is best for the rec center and for our programming. What's going to meet our needs.
Right, well, okay, then and again, and that's why I researched the gas bills, et cetera, is that I don't believe that we're charging enough money.
Oh, no, for sure.
Yeah, so regardless, I mean, I'm not unhappy with Mr. Kachina. I'm unhappy with the amount of money that Mr. Kachina pays. Right, so that's my position on it is, if we keep it as it is, then we need to almost double that rent.
Oh, at least double, if not
Right,
more. I mean, going rate right
So we
now
need to
is-
double it, but we have to give him that option. Now, if council decides that we want to turn it into a canteen, then we turn it, and Mr. Kachina might not even like that. So he might say, okay, at the end of this agreement, we're done.
I get that. And so you're right. If council decides we want to turn it into a canteen, then it becomes moot in terms of what we're going to charge a restaurant. So that's what I'm saying is, let's start with the decision of, do we want a restaurant in there or do we want a canteen in there?
Then I'll say I have no problem with the restaurant. The way it is right now, I have no problem. And again, my problem is just charge. renegotiate the
Okay.
lease.
So you would prefer to have a restaurant in there than a canteen?
Again, I don't, you know, honestly, I don't know if I can ask, because I don't have a problem with what is happening right now.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
so
not
you're
saying-
asking me to change it, like, it's like buying a new car. I don't have a problem with the car that I have, so I don't need a new car. Do you know what I mean? So I don't have a problem with the way it is right now. My problem is we're grossly undercharging.
Yes, I understand that.
So I'll stick with restaurant. I'm okay the way it is.
Okay, and just for clarification, I'm not suggesting that there is a problem with the way it is. I'm just saying that once the tender is up, council gets to revisit what we want in there. We have had some problems over the course of the last couple of years with people wanting to host birthday parties or socials or weddings in there, and they wanted to have access to kitchen facilities that we can't do because there's a restaurant in there. And so I'm just looking at how we're using the rec center and how we want to use the rec center in a go-forward basis. This is separate from, Carlo or anybody else. Anybody can put in a tender for a canteen or for a restaurant. It doesn't matter. That's not the issue. The issue is, how do we want the rec center to be used in terms of available food? Other people's thoughts. Councillor Kozlowski.
Yeah, I would like to see the way it's run now, where it's sort of a canteen restaurant area. I was there yesterday, I had a burger and a drink, and the kids were buying candies and everything, potato chips, and they did have a birthday party in there yesterday. He's got 6 long tables. The round tables are gone. Tables are together. He's taking up less space. I would like to see, though, changes to the contract when it comes up.
So you're suggesting, again,
Leave it the way,
separate from
it
who's
is
running
now.
it.
Leave it and let them provide the canteen service to the children, because there's a lot of that being sold at lunchtime, especially when they're coming in, and a restaurant for the people. We don't have enough restaurants in this town. Businesses are closing up. You go down the street, the restaurant is closed. You go to another restaurant, it's closed. You gotta go to Gimli. And we're taking our people away from this town to go to Gimli because we don't have enough businesses in here. And I surely don't want to lose another business. If we put it out to tender, and then we have him maybe upset and he doesn't negotiate with us and he says, I'm out of here. Now, there's a good possibility that rec center can stay empty.
Oh,
Those are my thoughts.
okay. So you would prefer to have a restaurant in there as opposed to a canteen?
Well, what he's got now, restaurant, canteen. He's got sort of 50.
No, it's actually a restaurant, it's not a canteen.
Well, he's got canteen where he's got chips, he's got kitties, candies,
Right.
chocolate bars. That's part of a canteen.
Right.
That's not part of a restaurant. That's part of a canteen, so he's taken a little bit from both.
When I'm saying canteen, what I mean by that is you have a place available for buying food.
Yeah.
When there's programs in the rec center. A restaurant is something that's open the restaurant's regular hours, whether there's programming there or not. And so it's not based on what kind of food is available, it's based on how it's run and when it's run.
Well, it does depend on what kind of food is there, because once again, it serves the children and it serves the adults.
Right, but what I'm saying is that the definition between a canteen and a restaurant
What?
isn't about the kind of food that's run. It's the same as the curling club. The curling club has food available when there's curling going on. So it would be the same here.
Yeah, well, I like to see the way it's run now.
Okay. Councillor Holt?
Yep, I like it to remain the same. I agree with Councillor Kozlowski and Doug as well, Councillor. Yeah, I like it to remain the same. Simple.
Okay. Councillor Gendron?
Okay, so I'm looking at it from the perspective of the operation of the building. 4 years ago, when council went to this contract with the idea of a restaurant, that building was run very differently. There was not a lot of programming going on. There was not a lot of effort to try and maximize the use of the building. Some of the things that I have taken into consideration is by having a restaurant in there, it limits the marketing of the facility. There is, we can't market it for socials because socials require food and people would not have access to the kitchen. Can't have large family parties where people want to bring in their own food and use the kitchen for preparation. That building is being used far more now than it was 4 years ago when this initial decision was made. And I just think that an in-house canteen, we now have an employee responsible for that building as a whole. And other things are going to be looked after by Peter and other individuals and trying to get the community involved. I think there is now the time for an in-house canteen that would also then allow us to have get control back over the kitchen in the building so that we can get more maximum use out of the facility, which is why I'm leaning towards a canteen. We need to bring, people in the community are using the building more, the building's getting more exposure. I would like to see that to continue.
People's thoughts to what Councillor Gendron said? No?
If I could change my mind.
Well, I'm not talking about changing your mind, I'm just talking about having a discussion. Like having a full table discussion about this.
I think Larry had good points. I think it's kind of a half canteen, half restaurant. I think it's operating just fine the way it is.
And you don't have any concerns about the kitchen space not being available for other
When's
things?
the last time we actually had a social here?
Well, I think that we don't because people don't have access
No,
to.
we didn't have one. There was just a canteen here either. Listen, we're bringing in rent. It's good for the town, as Doug said. It's another restaurant in town. Larry said, people obviously use it.
Mhm.
You're saying you're gonna have a canteen when there's programming running. It's no different than saying that the restaurant needs to be there when there's programming running. It's no different. We have control of it no matter how you look at it. I think it's operating well, and I think we'd be foolish to get rid of it. I really do.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about getting rid of it. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with
No,
you.
but
You want us to have
the questions today are very leading, and it's a little irritating, quite frankly. We ask us the question, we say restaurant, and then you ask us 7 more times about why. Listen, if we like the restaurant and we think it's working, that's where it should end. Plain and simple.
Councillor Hull, my questions aren't leading at all.
They are leading.
I'm wanting to make sure that we are looking at what we want in terms of the operation of the rec center. So when I say, as a rec center operationally, going forward for the next number of years, do we want a canteen or a restaurant in there? And when people say, oh, I like the restaurant that's in there, that's not answering the question. Is when we're looking at the operations of the building, is that what we need?
Well, of course,
For a
if you
rec
ask
center.
us what we wanted, we say restaurant, and then there's 7 more follow-up questions, and they're all the same. So at the end of the day, we do need to obviously raise the rent. That's clear.
Absolutely.
Whether we think it's double or triple or quadruple, whatever we suggest,
Mhm.
Again, there's not a hockey rink in Manitoba that makes money. So
No, I
at
know.
the end of the day, sure, we should be covering our bills at
Oh,
a
for
minimum.
sure, for sure.
But, if if anybody that thinks losing another restaurant in town is a good idea, I think that's scary.
I'm not suggesting that we should be losing another restaurant, and
I know you're not, I never said you suggested.
And I don't disagree with any of the things that are being said. I just want to make sure council's doing their due diligence in terms of looking at the future of the rec center and what's going to be in the best interest of the rec center.
And I think we are.
Okay, Councillor General.
Based on Councillor Toll's comments, I'd like to clarify that by no means do I have an issue with the restaurant and current restaurant operation. I'm actually a little insulted by Councillor Hull's comments. The question before me was how do I want to see the building operating? And that is the question I answered. And it had nothing to do with the current operator of the restaurant, whether I think it's a good restaurant or whether I think we should still be going with that restaurant owner. So I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
And what I said had no opinion on what you said.
Councillor Kozlowski.
Yeah, there's also the Legion next door, which can hold plenty of functions, such as birthday parties, give them access to the kitchen, socials, etc. But I think the way Carlos is running with a canteen/restaurant is great. It's covering both ends. It's covering for the kids, and it's also covering for the adults who want to come in and have a hamburger, chicken sandwich, whatever. And he's got the kids there for the kids. He's got the Slurpees he's brought in this year, chocolate bars, all kinds of different candies and everything. So he's covering both aspects, potato chips. And I like it the way it is.
Councillor Jarvis.
When we renegotiate the contract, we've all expressed previously, there's some concerns with the existing arrangement. That some of those concerns can be with the tables and the amount of space and whether it's a canteen, that can be addressed in the actual contract.
Oh, for sure it will be.
Right, exactly. So when I say my concern has always been the money. But I agree with some of the other concerns, and I know Councillor Gendron had expressed a concern about it operating as a commissary. And I have concern with that as well. Okay, especially if we're paying utilities and we're preparing food that goes somewhere else. So some of those concerns that we have as a group can be addressed in the renegotiation that's included in the price, so.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, there's a number of concerns with the current contract that we'll have to look at.
Right, that were never, and they might never, how do I put this? They might never have been even realized in the original contract. That it would be, it's morphed into something now that I don't think was the original intention. And I think that's what we're dealing with as well. And so we have to look at that objectively.
Yeah, absolutely. It's morphed into something that's outside the parameters of the contract.
Of what our
And that
intention, our
goes-
original intention was.
And also in terms of, frankly, what's in the contract.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that we'll have to figure out. So, we're wanting then to look at renegotiating this lease? Is that what people are saying?
Is renegotiating an option? We have a policy, a tendering policy. This was renegotiated for an extra year already. Does it not have to go out to tender?
That I would defer to Sharon.
I think it reads that way. It goes to tender.
The option year has already happened.
No, I think it reads that way, that it does go to tender.
It has to
With
go to tender.
amendment.
And then that, he has an option, I don't know.
He has the option to apply.
Yes. I could be wrong, but I agree, Dave.
Okay, so we definitely in-house is not moving forward, is that what I'm understanding as part of the
We
hearings?
want to know what the options are, right?
And so we're looking at
The tendering out piece?
tendering out piece. Councilor Jarvis.
When we tender out, we might end up going back to in-house anyways, if you don't get anybody that applies. Then you end up you assume responsibility again.
Yep.
So.
Yes.
So we haven't nullified the in-house decision. What we've done, we've agreed we're gonna
Move
renegotiate.
forward, yeah.
Sorry, I want to clarify on the renegotiate. I believe renegotiating with the current tenant is not an option. We have a tendering process and it needs to go to tender, is my understanding. This contract has expired.
It
So,
will expire, yeah.
yeah,
No, I agree.
Yeah.
That's
it's
what
not a
we said.
renegotiation, it's out to
Okay,
tender. Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
misspoken. It's still tendered out.
Yeah.
He has an option to,
Mhm.
Everyone has an
Apply,
option to, yeah.
so.
Okay, so, yeah, I guess it's the same as our garbage tender or any other tender, right? When the tender is out, it has to go back to tender. So what kind, check me here, Sharon, can we talk about the requirements of the tender out of camera, or does that need to be in camera?
I mean, it's, I think that the only way that this would be an in-camera discussion if it's matters in the preliminary stages, if you wanted to be looking at it, but for the most part, I don't see any, until we get to specifics of it.
Okay.
But generalities of it. So when we look at that, we're looking at, I guess, identifying the needs, so we could be looking at having some information that I could bring forward to a new tender for council review, like what are some of the items that we're looking at addressing.
Okay.
And so I guess some of the changes with that is looking at that at the level of access of the building as a whole. Has been some concern. We do have to be cognizant of our buildings, and I mean absolutely having public access. But that's generally when there is staff present, and so if there is no staff present and there's operations of the food facility, what does that look like? Because we do have, we can't just, at the current state of the building, there's no segregating the food area to the rest of the facility.
Right, there's not a separate exit and entrance for that.
But there is the takeout window there. So, there is, when you first go in the door, and before you actually enter into the main level of the community center, to your right is a takeout window. So, there is the option of them being able to, if we're looking at when there's no staff there, there is the option for them to still, the tenant to still be able to operate on a takeout basis.
Okay,
I concur. Councilor Dundas, right?
so we're looking at some of the larger issues then. That's really-
So it's difficult for me to give advice because I wasn't present during the existing lease arrangement. So I'm not sure what that process looked like and who identified what the needs were. If council has some feedback on that, that would be great. Otherwise, are we looking at taking the current agreement and then revamping it, or are we looking at what? Like, I'm not sure.
Well, Councilor Jarvis.
I would do the revamp. There's at least 4 things in here that I would like to change in the original contract.
Okay. Well, there's some things that we want to add as well.
Exactly, so,
So it's going to be like a new contract.
right, exactly. I think it needs to be looked at entirely.
So why don't we have some discussion in terms of, in general, what kinds of things do we need or want to see in the new contract? Because there's a list of things I have as well.
When this went out to tender, it went out with the individuals submitting a bid, kind of a bid, and what they were willing to pay per month to use the space. I think we need to go to establishing a rent ourselves, not allowing them to let us know what they'd be willing to pay. Because as we've discovered, it's insufficient as a going rate for the community, and it is insufficient for our expenses, added expenses. And while hockey rinks don't make money, I don't think as a town it's fair to the taxpayers to be covering the costs of a local business that happens to be operating in our facility. I think it should be borne by the whoever is running the restaurant, that they are paying sufficiently to cover expenses. Councillor Jarvis brought forward some figures that were included for us to see or had requested on hydro expenses. I don't think the taxpayer should be paying a hydro bill for a business. It would be a different situation if we were running a canteen, but we're not. It's a private business running in there, and they should be responsible for all of their expenses, not the taxpayers.
Well, I think that's how restaurants operate, even if restaurants are renting space, which is why, one of the reasons why I was trying to determine whether people are wanting to see it as a canteen or a restaurant. Because if it's a canteen for the town business, then we assume the expenses. If it's an individual restaurant who's running out of our rec center, they assume the expenses. So that's one of the reasons why I was trying to get people to think about how they wanted to see this. So you're suggesting you'd like to see it as an independent restaurant, then we need to look at what the costs are for anybody who's renting space to run a restaurant, right? And so in my mind, if I'm renting space to run a restaurant, I'm probably paying $4,000 or $5,000 a month. I'm paying all utilities, I'm paying for equipment, I'm paying for repairs, I'm paying for all of those things. And so, you know, that's probably needs to be included in this contract.
Have we even entertained 6-month contracts? Like, why don't we tender it out for hockey season, and then we just assume responsibility after that? So just have it as a 6-month lease.
I can't imagine, I mean, if we're doing that, then we're operating a canteen. I can't imagine a restaurant investing in wanting to build a restaurant in this town. They happen to be in the rec center, because that's what we're saying. We're open for business in the rec center to have a restaurant in there. We can't then say to the restaurant, you get to run 6 months of the year. If we want food available 6 months of the year, we're looking at a canteen. Would you, as a restaurant owner, rent space 6 months of the
It
year?
happens all the time in resort areas, and take the Whiteshill, West Hawk, for example, or they operate in the summer, and that's it. You know, like, I mean.
Right.
It's true. I mean, I think that presuming, you know,
Like-
others' needs or visions of space, I think
It's not uncommon.
I would caution council on that. I mean, having in terms of anything. I mean, so if there are options available, we are a seasonal community. There are several businesses that do close through the winter period and not through the summer, although this may pose an opportunity for somebody to run in the winter and not in the summer when there are other businesses. I think keeping an open mind as to what the lease agreements, keeping an open mind of what lease agreements are, is something to consider. I think that it's unknown at this point. Like, we're putting together what the vision looks like, and I really encourage councils to really look at it from a holistic point of all opportunities that may present itself, as we have minimal programming in the facility in the summer, simply due to everyone wanting to be outside. It may at that point be of benefit, where you have then control of the area in the summer, which can allow for
And that's what I was gonna say.
pieces
That,
that come through there.
If we go with a 6 month, so let's look at it like the winter season. If we go with something over the winter, then that satisfies both things in the fact that it would then enable us to have control of the area in the summer when there's things like socials and family get-togethers and things. and we could then possibly take back the canteen, the kitchen area over the summer, or vice versa.
Okay.
And if I may, I mean, pros and
Mhm,
cons to
mhm.
everything. One of the complications with a 6-month lease, however, is the fact of equipment. So when we look at equipment and operational and replacement of equipment, if council's moving towards a private business running out of that space, we have to determine what the parameters are around the equipment, because, and so the equipment piece can be very tricky if it's 6 months and then we have it 6 months and, but council, it's, everything is open for discussion, right?
Councillor Jarvis?
And look, it used to be, and I think it's still current, that the Snack Shack on Manitoba Avenue in Selkirk also operates all the concessions in the Selkirk Arena. And they do that only in the winter. So they, and it wouldn't be uncommon for a lot of people just to pick up the concession stands. And that's no different than the Winnipeg Arena. Do you know what I mean? The old, or the phone booth now is that you have people that operate during hockey season and they don't operate any other time of the year.
Okay. So you're suggesting that
It could be an option, a 6-month
Yes.
contract.
Options.
an
we're
option
just-
For
for,
example, I'll say September 15th to the March 15th. You know what I mean? And I don't see a problem, because I mean, I worked for a restaurant company that had facilities in tourist areas, and they would only open in the summer.
Mhm.
And they did fabulous business, and then they shut the whole thing down through the winter, and then they
No,
would
I-
assemble.
I know.
Yeah.
In my mind, I see that more as a canteen, but if we want to call
But
it
it
a
can be,
restaurant, I
as
don't care.
Councillor Jean-John indicated, it can be your canteen in May and June. And that gets about 3 of the concerns right off my list, if we assume responsibility on April 1st. And then we relieved of our responsibility on September the 30th.
Mhm.
So-
What are other people's thoughts about that? Doing a 6-month? Councillor Jarvis?
It has its pros and cons, and it would enable the facility to be available for other alternate use. But I think if we're going with a 6-month, we need to have control of the kitchen.
What is that?
Off contract.
Oh, control of the kitchen when he's not.
When they're not on
they're not
contract, yeah. So right now, it's our equipment in there. We have a brand new fryer in there.
Mhm.
It's our equipment in there. Yeah, I think the only way that's gonna work though is if we continue to have responsibility for the replacement of equipment. And I don't know if we wanna get into that. Although I don't know what else could happen that is gonna cost us as much as that fryer did, but, maybe it goes out and people are open to offering, to either requesting a 6-month, and if we get somebody that wants to go into an annual contract, and an annual contract serves us better than a 6-month, we go with the annual.
But then it would be a different kind of contract. The contract would be different if we have a 6-month versus a annual.
In what way?
Well, in 6 months, there would probably be a sharing of responsibility for the equipment. If it's annual, and the person wants it 12 months of the year, then they're responsible for the equipment.
Right, but that would be, like, parameters, I don't believe those sorts of things were put into the tender that went out. Those were things that were, sort of hammered out once there was a successful, bid received, and then from there, those sorts of things were put into the contract that the CAO at the time put together. So,
If I were gonna be bidding on a tender, I'd wanna know whether some of my expenses are gonna be replacing any equipment that gets broken and maintaining it, or whether I'm not responsible for that, because that can have the bidder.
That's built into the contract, though. That's what it's the same thing as when you have a building that's on a parking lot, there's what they call common lot. So everybody pays into that. So example being, if you're gonna assume wear and tear on your equipment, then that's built into the rent.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, so if the straight bare minimum is $100 a month, but then you want to, almost like a reserve fund, you're gonna say, well, I'm gonna start charging you $150.
Mhm.
And every month you put $50 and that goes to equipment replacement, but that's, you bear that cost. You put that cost or the concept that you're gonna have wear and tear on your equipment into the rent.
Right,
Yeah, it's like putting a deposit down on it.
Yeah.
So the contract piece, when we're looking at having that discussion with the contract, because that is considered matters in the preliminary stages. So if council so chooses to want to talk about the contract, to say what the contract is, because they are two separate pieces, and I agree, no different than with the garbage tender that was issued out. The garbage tender was issued out.
Mhm.
People could view what the contract would look like to see if they wanted to fill up the tender. So I think that they
I
do
see.
go hand in hand, where we have to look at what is the contract look like, and then what does our tender look like, right? So they're and very much like with the garbage tender, this particular garbage tender listed, there were 3 options
Mhm.
that the contractor needed to submit
I see.
for. We could be looking at offering that same level of option
Mhm.
as part of our tender, as per 6 months. You may find that there may be a need for someone else for the 6 months in the summer, that whether it's the same or different vendor in there, that it might suit their needs for a different purpose. And so I think, like, when we look at the tender piece of it, I think maybe we need to be concentrating a bit more on the contract as to what the expectation of council is, regardless of 6 months, year round, or anything. Like, what's the expectation of council as a contract of anyone renting that space? And then once that's put out, then revisiting the tender piece itself. And so with some of the flow chart, it seems we've kind of got to the point of changes to the contract.
Mhm.
And that piece listed on the agenda, looking at contract changes, was identified as an in-camera item, so that you can have that conversation of and I caution, because some of the stipulations council may want in, if there are any stipulations in there, I have to make sure that legally that it's an appropriate piece, right?
Mhm.
So,
Okay, so changes to the contract and the in-camera discussion.
yeah. So we've made headway with where we're looking at doing the tender out, and we've looked at having some of the options. But again, getting back to a tender, regardless of the stipulations, because that's still conversation, is taking a look at the term. Are we looking at another 3-year term?
I think that we should look at a 2-year term, because we are only going to be on council for another 2 years.
Wow.
And we've run into other issues that we are dealing with, terms from previous council that we wouldn't necessarily go with.
True, Madam Mayor. As a CEO, though, I would recommend to many councils to caution leaving everything due for a new council. It does take time for councils
That's true.
to get familiar with all functions of a community. And so, although yes, some contracts can terminate at the same time of a new election, there is some caution. There is some caution with that. And so again, even coming down at this point, it's an October to an October. Even the time frame through that, when we're looking at the spaces of that, like and I guess because it's the rec center, it makes sense. But is looking at caution and leaving too much left for new councils to come in.
So 3-year term might make more sense.
As we're having a conversation in April over a contract that's due in October. So in fairness to both the new council or
3-year term makes sense then, council.
Yeah, this was a 3-year with an option of a 4th.
or a 2-year with the option of the 3rd.
Was this a 2 with an option of a
No.
third, or 3 with, oh,
2-year with
an option of a third? Yeah, so if we went with a
Stay that the
2-year and an
same?
option of a third, then new council, oh no, it wouldn't be
Well-
new council, it would still be this council determining whether or not,
25, no, it would, yeah.
it would be the, look, yeah, because we're having the discussion,
Right.
and, yeah, so it would still be this council making the decision as to whether or not it
And
would be
that's,
going a
if
third.
it's 2-year, it would then be up October of 26, and I don't think that it's fair at this
No.
point for new council to be looking at that.
No,
because
we would be
have-
looking, yeah, if it's again the 2 with an option of a
Yeah.
third, we would be addressing it in April before the election
Mhm.
as to whether or not we're going to be
True,
giving that third year option.
yes, true,
Yeah.
but in an election year, council,
So why don't we just do a 3-year?
A 3-year,
3-year,
yeah.
What do other people think?
Yeah.
3-year, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, what else should we be deciding that's not in camera?
I think, well, it's anything that's not the parameters of the contract itself. So council's looking to set the rent amount themselves. They're looking at potentially having option of 6-month periods to 1-year periods or full year. And then we're looking at 3 years. And I think that, so equipment is a piece, and access to the building, like, so that's when staff is not there. So I think that, no, that could be, all of those could be contractual, I suppose. When the tender went out, I didn't actually see the tender, I've only seen the agreement. I can look and have Jody
It would have been,
find if it's saved somewhere else.
if not, it would have been in the Express.
In the Express, okay, yeah, okay.
Councilor Jarvis?
When you say access to the facility, is that 12 months of the year?
Well, so the concern is when there's no staff present, there's full access upstairs, downstairs, everywhere.
Yeah, but,
right? And
okay,
so
because
that's-
I clarified that through the Department of Health, and you can close that off. Like, you can have like a collapsible wall that can, as indicated, he can use his takeout window, if you want to go that way. So that can be shut down. And access can be cut
Right, but
off.
so that's one of the discussions we need to have,
okay.
is that when there
Right.
isn't any of our staff there,
Right.
anybody who's going in right now to access the restaurant actually has access to the whole
Right, but
building.
to expound
So-
on that, one of the things we need to is designated common area, because there was never any designated common area in the original contract.
True,
So that, if you're gonna say, like, that's a whole can of worms that we need to look at. And that's been expressed by every single person in this room, and, you know,
Right, so let's just first of all talk about access to the building when there's no staff there, and then we'll also look at designated area. Councilor Grohl?
We also discussed prior to this council that, when there was nobody in the building, they were talking about putting a gate.
yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, so that's what we should have done a long time ago, but we didn't move on for some reason. So
Okay.
we could just simply put a little draw gate and it's takeout only when there's no staff there. Simple.
Councilor Jundon?
Do we want to consider, in order to simplify things, and that we put it out to tender as a takeout restaurant?
I don't know, what do council members think? Councilor Jarvis?
I don't have a problem with the designated area. And, like, example being, to command the entire floor of that common area is ridiculous. If we gave, and if memory serves me correct, you're allowed 1 chair per 12 square feet. So giving them 48 square feet is 4 chairs, giving them 96 is 8 chairs. If you give them 96 or whatever, 132 feet, he can put a dozen chairs in there, you know what I mean? And he's fine with that. You know, like this pushing and pushing and pushing, because one of the things, and with getting into the original, the 2007 report, was people wanted a common area to be able to watch games. We have things like line dancing, we have things like pickleball, that suddenly it becomes an obstacle, and that shouldn't be, right? Like, but if I say, you know, without being silly, you know, like, if you tape the floor and here's where your 3 tables go, then that's where those 3 tables go. So that's why I'm saying that we should maybe discuss, and that can be built into the rent as well.
Absolutely, we have to discuss that,
Yeah.
for sure. Councillor Jen?
The sort of the pickleball lessons or the line dancing and those sorts of things are sort of what I was thinking about when I was suggesting maybe we look at takeout only.
No, I understood that.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
there's no,
Because that's been a big problem, and I've heard that in the past.
and then there's no, because if we're saying that they can be open for business when we have staff there, and takeout only when there isn't, and then what happens when things change with programming and suddenly there is nobody there because, you know, a group canceled or something, like, I just don't know what our responsibility is going to be, and that's maybe something that needs to be looked at before we make this decision, that suddenly now there's no staff here and you know, whoever is running the restaurant says, well, I have a group of 12 people that we're planning on coming in, now what do we do? And so, you know, just something we need to consider before we make that decision of, are we giving common area space or are we going takeout only? Because
So you're suggesting that we do takeout only all of the time?
all of the time.
And then if the rec center and you do it by them walking in the door and not having access to the rec center, just using the takeout window. And then if the rec center happens to be open and if I happen to go there to get takeout, then I can take my takeout into the rec center
Yeah,
and sit down and eat.
yeah,
But it's not a given that you have a restaurant set up at all.
absolutely. It's not a given. Then they're using the facility, not the restaurant. And like, if, you know, if kids bring in chips and stuff because they're watching a hockey game or something,
Yeah.
our staff's responsible for the cleanup. But it's not gonna be that there's, you know, X number of tables there all the time for people to sit at. It's individual, you know, as you said, it's a takeout only, but I came grab my food, I notice the facility's open, I'm gonna go sit down and eat rather than go home.
Other thoughts on that? Do people agree with making it a takeout only facility?
I don't have a problem with it.
No, I like the restaurant's still part where you go in and eat.
So how would you suggest that we deal with when the staff
Staff,
are there and when the staff aren't there and what we do for security?
well, first off, our staff, they're up 24/7, and they're not, right? Closes down at whatever time. There might be no staff there, and the kids are in there playing. They're skating,
Okay,
which I heard recently.
okay. But the question before us is, when there's no programming there and there's no staff there, do
Yeah.
you want people coming in to use the restaurant and have access to the rest of the building?
No, like we said, we can put gates across or whatever, close that off.
Okay,
To going downstairs or to the other end, right? If there's no staff available, have it locked up. Just give them access to the restaurant part, the tables, chairs.
okay, so you're saying,
Because none of these businesses can survive around here with a takeout window. None of them will. People want to go in, they want to sit down, they want to have maybe a glass of wine, a drink, whatever with them.
okay. Councillor Jarvis?
I agree with the takeout concept, because unless I'm mistaken, we've had some concerns with the, who cleans up after.
Oh, yeah, there's been lots of concerns.
Okay, now, one of the things that we described about the collapsible wall, and just going with the takeout window, was the fact that, you know, we have our staff cleaning washrooms and our staff cleaning tables, and theoretically, it's not our responsibility. Now, the original contract doesn't list any common area, it just lists the canteen.
That's right,
So, I mean, therefore, there are no tables.
that's right.
There is no restaurant as per se.
That's
There's a
right.
canteen.
That's
And
right.
so we operate under that way. Now, as described by Councillor Chandra, is if there's a table available and somebody wants to sit there, then we know that we assume, like our staff can't complain of the fact that, you know, there's a hamburger wrapper, or there's french fries on the floor. It becomes our responsibility. If none of our staff are there and we close the wall, then it's moot. You're a taker, period. Eat in the car.
Councillor Jen?
Yeah, I just want to point out, this contract started during COVID, and this restaurant did very well as a takeout only because sitting down in a restaurant wasn't an option for quite some time while they were getting their business up. So it survived quite well as a takeout only.
Just for the record, there are restaurants right now that will not open a restaurant unless there's a drive-through window on it.
I know.
So, I mean, if your stipulation is I have to have a takeout window, then takeout windows function.
Mhm.
And you can go buy any Tim Hortons and they're lined up down the street and around the corner and they're in their car and it's air conditioning's on or the heat's on and they don't move.
Councillor Hu?
I do like the idea of isolating people. You know, the first thought was as a takeout, blocking off that one area, but if we could limit access to the downstairs area from both ends, to me that makes sense. And as for cleaning, again, that's something we can put in the new contract as well.
Well, it
We're
actually is
limitless.
it's actually in the existing contract, it's just not being followed necessarily. So you're not suggesting a takeout window, you are saying if there's no staff there, limit the access to the downstairs, but let them have access to the main floor?
Yeah, I mean, we're unlimited. It's up to what we decide. I mean, if we decide that, you know, closing off the basement's not a good idea, when there's no staff, then we do the takeout. If we decide that, yes, they can have some seating, you know, then we close off the access to downstairs. I think it's very simple.
Like, won't kids want to come in there and play during
that's-
some of these times?
But that's the problem, is if we don't have any staff there.
Okay, so why wouldn't we have a staff there on, say, a Saturday or Sunday afternoon?
No, what
The
I'm,
place closes at 8 o'clock.
okay, what I'm saying, what the issue is, we have staff there when we have programming there. And so there could be rec hockey, stick and puck, all that kind of stuff, so there's staff there. But when there's no programming there, program's over, but the person who's running the restaurant is open until 10 o'clock, and all the programs are over by 8 o'clock, the staff go home. And so you've only got the people in the restaurant, but if you have the doors open, you now have kids who could be 10 years old running around and playing, and nobody's responsible for them, because the restaurant's not responsible for them. So now the town has allowed kids to have access to a building with no adult supervision. And now one of those kids gets hurt. And who's responsible?
Okay, and that's just happened here,
Whether it's happened or
right? No
not.
staff there, and
Okay.
kids playing on the ice, etc. That
And,
has happened with no staff there.
okay,
Yeah, it has happened.
and so what I'm saying is, in order to decrease the possibility of that happening, that when staff are there doing programming, the staff are responsible for the people in the building coming for the programming. When the staff is going home, the staff makes sure the building is empty, they leave. If the person who's running the restaurant is still there, we should not have it such that people can still access the building, because that's our responsibility.
Well, that's not happening.
Councillor Jarvis.
I volunteered there about 15 years ago. And they used to do the Tuesday afternoon after-school skate. And it was myself, and I was and I volunteered in that canteen. And there was another woman that was there. She was some sort of adult chaperone, but there was no staff. And there were kids, sometimes a dozen, 15 kids running around that place. And we had a woman, an elderly woman, in the common area looking through the glass. And I'd be in the canteen, and there'd be not one single adult, not one staff member supervising any of those children. And they were running wild through that whole thing. And that was 14, 15 years ago.
And so that's why we're having this
Right,
discussion.
and that woman ended up quitting. She just,
So can we agree that we do a takeout window? And then it's takeout only?
Yeah.
But as Councillor Gendron indicated though, if it's open and it's staffed by us and there's facilities, then they can sit down and eat. We're just
course,
responsible for cleaning it up.
Of course. Yeah, so as long as we have staff there, they can go to the takeout window, get their food, go inside the rec center, sit down, eat, do whatever they
Correct,
want.
as long as we're open.
But it will be,
But it's always gonna be a takeout window, so that people don't get confused as when is a takeout window, when is it not takeout, all that kind of stuff. And whoever gets the tender can have whatever hours they want, is not dependent upon programming. They can be open to midnight every night if they'd like to, because it's a takeout window only. Councillor Jones?
That's a food court, when you go to Polo Park, that's the way that works, it's a common area, everybody, if you can take, if it's all packaged out, it's all considered takeout.
Right, and so when the rec center is open for programming, if they wanna go and sit down at a table and have their food, they get to, otherwise it's all takeout window. Does that make sense for folks?
yes.
Okay. Are there other things we need to be talking about in terms of general, there's not gonna be changes
So-
to the contract?
There is one more. It indicated that we need a commercial grill.
So equipment as a whole is.
Well, one of the stipulations that I read was that the grill has to be replaced, so that should be a topic as well.
Well, no, I don't think they said it had to be replaced, they said,
I'm
that
pretty sure
their
that's what it
plywood,
That's, I
That
think
can't-
that
that-
should be
No,
discussed.
yeah,
No.
that's,
that's an
yeah.
But
in-camera
that's-
discussion.
No, that-
So it
yeah.
doesn't say that it has to be replaced, that's an option.
Okay,
Pam?
Pam.
That's an in-camera discussion?
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry,
Yep, I understand.
in camera,
Okay,
but maybe that does bring up the conversation in terms of, equipment and who's responsible for it. So are we suggesting takeout, are we suggesting 6 months a year, or suggesting 12 months a year? Or are we gonna be setting out a tender for two different options?
I think it should be two different
Yeah,
options.
haven't we- yeah.
Two different
Yeah, we
options?
should have both options.
Okay,
And the rent should be, or the charge of rent should be applicable to whatever option they choose.
for sure. Now, is the rent, in camera discussion?
I would.
that's, yeah, part of the, like with the contract going through,
Okay.
like until you determine some of the other pieces of the contract, of what's our ownership, what's not our
Okay.
ownership, it's hard to determine what, an appropriate, charge would be.
I'd like to suggest that if it's a 6-month, that it's shared expenses in terms of equipment. That if it's a 12-month contract, then the restaurant owner and operator is responsible for the equipment. Is that in camera? Or is that in
No, not really, but I think that, until we look at, again, all parameters, whether it's 6 months or a full year, I guess that's part of determining how council sees it working, right? So if the equipment is town equipment, as Councillor Jarvis stated, that you'd be looking and taking ownership of that. So, because you may have two
Yeah.
separate entities, 6 months, you may have 12-month person, right? Like, it's still unknown, that I think that when we look at setting those parameters, is stipulating anything that is, borne by the town, like, or responsibility of the town, that an appropriate allocation from the rent is implemented to determine the charge, so that we have the funds to maintain the equipment or maintain our responsibilities. Because I can't condone public money spent for private gains. So
Oh,
we have to make
gotcha.
sure within the rent that whatever council determines is the town's responsibilities, that we've clearly outlined what our responsibilities, those are costs associated with those responsibilities, and then implement that.
Just a question, is the kitchen area on a separate gas meter?
No.
I don't believe so.
No,
Could you check into the cost of what it would cost to get that put as a separate meter?
prohibitive. Yeah, it costs a lot of money. Costs $7,000 just to hook up the fryers. So,
But I can look into it if that's going forward, if that's the challenge where the utilities then are borne by the rental piece, then that's, I don't know how the lines are running there, and I think it's because you have gas and hydro. I'm not familiar with the infrastructure and how it runs. One of the concerns I do have though is I know that the arena is 3-phase power, and so I don't know how that piece of it works. They are different types of meters. The 3-phase, don't ask me what the difference is, but it is a different type of system, the 3-phase power, from than just a single regular metered piece. But if that's what it is, that we look at a separate meter piece of it that's not part of the 3-phase, I don't know if it's, I don't know
You
what's
should
entailed with that.
be able to segregate the natural
Yeah,
gas quite
so-
easily, actually.
So I can look into
I think
hydro
it's a
for
good
that.
idea.
Because again,
Yeah,
if that's the situation, then we would be able to just hold the person who has the lease responsible for their own utilities.
Utilities.
yeah, yeah, I can look into that.
What other things, Karen, should we be discussing?
I think that a lot of the other pieces are more contractual
Okay.
than like the lease, because we're looking, leases are fairly basic as the contract that comes with it.
Mhm.
Very similar like with our garbage.
Okay. And can we, just procedurally, can we have an in-camera discussion today?
It is
So we
listed,
can
yeah,
finish
it is listed. I do have if council's discussing the parameters of the
Okay,
evaluation criteria or contract rate.
brilliant.
Yes. And so second item was the existing contract. There was some concerns that were brought forward from council in reference to the existing contract.
In the current lease agreement?
Correct,
So we wanted to talk about that now?
correct. I did look to see it doesn't meet, like discussing an existing contract. It's not matters in the preliminary stages, and there's no clause for in camera.
Okay.
Because it's
Um,
a public contract.
I know on the first page there, number 2. We need to make sure that that's, if that's gonna be in the current contract, how we're gonna enforce that. And I guess the access thing is covered by number 1, right? Because that is saying that the area containing the kitchen and canteen facilities is the only area that the leaseholder will have.
True, so, but there is no accommodation of segregating the existing building outright now to adhere to that. So this contract was in place, but yet, and
I have a little history. In fairness to the current renter, it was brought to council for discussion, previous council, about allowing some table space. Councillor Hall, do you recall?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't recall how much was decided, but and unfortunately it wasn't done in, I'm going to assume it wasn't done in writing as per the contract. But there was discussion I believe the initial discussion happened with the CAO, or I'm not sure whether it was the CAO or Councillor Holder brought it forward at the time. There was the request, and council did agree to allowing some table use, provided it didn't interfere with programming.
I see.
Okay,
So,
good to know.
So Jarvis, you said you had some concerns about the current contract?
I thought we were done with number 2. We need some sort of a schedule. I still have under cleaning of the exhaust system. And again, we need to have actual text regarding who's responsible for what cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
Because we end up, and I've witnessed it before, where staff are cleaning up tables, et
Oh,
cetera,
absolutely.
and washrooms, if they are available. Now, again, that could be solved with takeout only.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned before about it, and I had it written down as the equipment, but I think that should be built into either a security deposit of some sort, which he has, or the rent. It should be built into the rent for equipment, which is gone to a reserve fund.
Councillor Gendron?
Could the recreation staff just be directed to stop cleaning?
I have directed, yes.
Yeah, well,
Right, but I think that's also hard for the recreation staff when she comes in, when they come in the morning and they know that the kids are gonna be coming in and the area that people are using for the restaurant is filthy. She doesn't want the kids having to deal with that, so she cleans up.
all that needs to then be a discussion with the CAO, who then needs to, so that she is aware and can follow up with.
Correct, and
Yeah.
so with the follow-up, if there's any concerns, I'd like to address all concerns at once.
Yeah.
With
Okay.
the existing contract.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Jarvis, can you clarify about the exhaust system? Is it being done or not being done?
C.
I think it should be submitted. I think, again, it should be an automatic submitted, a copy of the invoice to the office every 6 months. That's into the contract.
Well,
Now, I know this, because I mentioned this in the health and safety committee meetings, and they built like a deflector over top of the electrical panel, but that exhaust system drips right down onto an electrical panel.
I know.
And that's just an accident waiting to happen.
Yep.
You know, so that, we need to ensure, and I know one restaurant in the city that's quarterly, because when you clean your exhaust system, it's either done based on volume or annually. And whoever your insurance agent usually says, well, that needs to be cleaned every 3 months, or that should be cleaned every 6 months. And we're asking for 6 months, and we have, I can't remember the last time it was done. I think it was almost a year.
Well, it says here in the contract that is their responsibility to do it every 6 months
Correct,
by a service approved by the CAO.
but they should be submitting, you know what I mean, like, try not paying your homeowner's insurance and see if you don't get a bill right away, like, you know, like, they're gonna phone you. So this should be an automatic, it should come to us every 6 months.
Okay.
And like, right now, I have a concern with the cleaning of the exhaust system, like, it's, and I'm almost tempted to say, well, you need to go every 3 months, quarterly, that should be done quarterly, and that should be in the contract, because there's a huge safety issue there.
But this is the existing contract.
Right, when we
says
renegotiate, again, like we were talking
months,
about number 2, all this stuff might be addressed when we renegotiate the contract.
Well, it has to be addressed now.
Have we approached them about, like, the cleaning and all this, like, have we actually sat down and talked with them
but
about
I
it?
have.
I have,
Okay, so when they do a cleaning of the exhaust, don't they have to, by law, put a sticker on there or some
Correct.
sort of, with the date code?
but frankly, you can buy stickers.
Okay, well,
Come on.
No, I'm just telling you, you can.
Yeah,
Yeah, like, and I'm not suggesting that's the case, I'm just saying that that's an
I
option.
could put a post-it note there
but-
too.
Yeah, but when I get an invoice from, like, I can't take a picture of my thing and send it to my insurance company, I have to send them a copy of the invoice that it's been
Right.
paid. And that, because that's liability.
Okay, and I'll ask her if I can do that. And so with section 2, so that has not been followed throughout any of the time, my understanding of this agreement. Am I hearing correctly that council is stating number 2 must be enforced this year?
Yes.
Absolutely,
Okay.
Mhm.
Is that?
absolutely.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, okay.
Okay.
Okay, and section 4C
Has to be enforced
is
ASAP.
the exhaust system, and I will ask for a copy of the invoices for cleaning so that it's meeting the 6-month period.
And for D,
And I will have another conversation with D. Is there any other items on the existing contract?
not as far as I'm concerned.
Um,
Councillor
You
Kozlowski?
got the liquor there and cannabis sales are not permitted?
That's right.
Liquor is permitted there
Oh, it's
on
not.
special occasions where they've done trivia night and,
That's only if somebody goes and gets a special license.
so who gets the license? Is it the town?
Yes, the town,
So
the
it's
town's
town, and
hosting
that's
the
the town's-
event.
The town's revenue then,
Yes,
so Carlos does not.
correct.
Carlos is on board.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
Councillor Jandron?
yeah, there's been some discussion with regards to signage.
Okay.
What number is this?
17. Is this specifically outdoor signage only, or is this inside as well?
It's outdoor signage only.
Okay. Is there any reference anywhere to indoor signage needing approval?
No, there is
Not
not.
that I've seen.
Okay, well, we'll have to be mindful of that next time, because,
Yeah, there's a sign inside there that, saying no outside food or drink is permitted, and I think that sign needs to be removed. Because, you know, I can come in there and watch a hockey game and I can bring a bag of chips and a Coke. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think we should be limiting people doing that.
I agree.
So that sign needs to come off.
Did the town place that sign, or is
I have
that?
no idea.
We don't know, that's the question.
That
Okay.
wasn't there before.
That wasn't there before, okay.
I just appeared, Councillor Jarvis.
We don't have, are there vending machines downstairs too? None. Didn't we used to have them? I've never been in a hockey arena that didn't have vending machines. For Cokes and things like that.
Yeah, we discussed this last council too. I don't remember what became of it though.
I think we haven't had vending machines in that building because the building wasn't getting enough use to support vending
No, there
machines.
used to be vending
Now they
machines.
are.
There were vending machines on the upstairs though.
Yeah, there
Now
used
it
to be.
is.
There was two.
And I think that the vending machine company moved them out because they weren't being used enough.
Which was in direct relation to the amount the building was being used.
Yeah.
So something we need to
Consider.
and make a decision on before we go out to tender.
Okay, but that cannot be discussed, this is a special meeting. and-
No, I'm just saying, yes, that's-
On a
yeah,
special
that's-
meeting,
yeah.
discuss. Okay,
Do we know the date the fryer came in?
the
The
March.
fryer, the new fryer?
fryer,
March of 2022, I believe.
I'd have to go
I'm
back
pretty sure.
and look at that.
Thanks.
The date what, sorry?
Oh, the fryer came in.
Oh,
March, I'm pretty sure it was March of 2022. Oh, no,
No, I don't think
because,
so, 'cause
no,
I-
it would have been in the fall
23.
because Mark Bartley was here.
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
It was
I
before
think
you.
that it was purchased and then there was a
It came in the fall of
delay with the
2022.
There
installation.
was a delay because the
Yeah.
gas hookup took us a while. We had to get a gas order.
It was fall of 2022.
Okay. Any other items with the current lease agreement?
yeah, just a question, so these things that we have discussed and would like brought forward, would they need to be done in writing as per number 20?
We can pass a resolution of council outlining administration to discuss the following with the current, and then I can list those items.
My point being, rather than, or discussion and written, because
Yes.
the contract does say that any notice needs to be given in writing.
Yes.
Okay, that's all, I just want to make sure that it's not just verbal.
Do that.
That's right. Minus 19.
Yeah, it's less than 2024. Or 23.
Anything else, council, with the current lease or next item agenda? Next item agenda. Okay, changes in the Manitoba building codes, pools and hot tubs. So this did make it to the regular meeting of council and then deferred to a special meeting of council to discuss. So the EIPD booklet and the zoning bylaw amendment flow chart has been attached, as well as the email response. So the question before council is in reference to the Manitoba building codes, removing the regulations that were part of the building codes have been removed for the hot tubs and pools. And so through the planning district, East Interlake Planning District is looking for feedback from council, because our current zoning bylaw references the building codes and those codes are no longer there. So the options before council, as pointed out through EIPD, was to just have EIPD make these recommendations that this is the safe way to do things, or if we are wanting to exceed our regulations or our parameters, we would have, other than the building codes, we would have to actually stipulate and do a zoning bylaw amendment.
And in talking, or actually thinking about this, you look at, well, there's a few things. And thinking about this, if EIPD is putting out recommendations as opposed to stipulations, if we want to change our zoning bylaw to make stipulations, that is, this kind of process, A, and B, and we're also looking at enforcement. And so for us to take steps to exceed the recommendations of the province, I'm not sure we should be spending our time and energy doing that. I certainly think we could be making recommendations or supporting EIPD in their recommendations, or if anybody comes here for information about what they need for their hot tub or their pool, suggest to them that there are recommendations and they need to contact EIPD, or even have copies of the recommendations here that we can give to people so we can make the information available. But if the province is saying these are the standards you have to meet, and this municipality is saying, yeah, well, we want to increase those standards and make them up here, that's going to be a whole lot of work, A, and B, can we then enforce them? And as we know, enforcement has been a problem. We're trying to enforce the current bylaws. Councillor Jarvis.
I agree. I think it, as discouraged as I am by taking some of this stuff off, it's become almost an obstacle to try and change. I mean, regardless, so I agree.
Other people? Councillor Gendron?
I guess what makes it difficult is not understanding what was behind the province's decision. Did they want to offload it on to the communities so that they could be responsible for making the decision and policing it and not, or did they remove it because they didn't think it was necessary? So that's kind of what I struggle with. As far as the enforcement piece, I know that is a big issue, and one of the things that I thought about with regard to enforcement is, you put a culvert in, we have rules you have to follow, you have to put a deposit down, you don't get your deposit back until Public Works comes and ensures that you've followed the parameters laid out for installing a culvert. So something similar to that, if you're putting in a pool or a new hot tub, then you know that it's been initially looked after when they put it in. But if I'm the only one that thinks along that way, where,
Well,
majority thinks that it is a lot of work, I see that. And if the majority thinks that it's not a road worth going down, then I will support whatever is decided by majority.
So planning did not receive additional information as to why the province made the decision to change the building codes. They speculated the big reason is the shift that's happening to the inflatables, both in hot tubs and in pools. And so then when we looked at the building codes around the inflatables, they didn't meet the actual permanent structures that was normal back through the years, where it was more permanent pools and hot tubs that were built in place. So there's really nothing I can offer as to why that changed. I think when we looked at the enforcement piece, and planning did concur as well, is the timelines. When you look at having bylaws in place and having people, you do have to give people the opportunity to rectify the infraction, and you have to give reasonable time to rectify the infraction. And so with the blow-up pools, one of the challenges is the fencing piece that was part of the building codes being removed, was you still have to, and so when you look at erecting a fence at this point, you have to give adequate time to actually put the fence in place. And so by that process going through, and then you have your notice of violation, and then you have the inspection date, and then you can only issue the formal order. And to that point, then council can take action, or we can take action to do the scope of work required. But with these inflatables, going through that process, because it's such a short window, people are not placing the inflatables up in May or June. They generally go up in July. The time that then we receive an infraction notice, we have to give the 2 weeks to do the inspection, like we still have to follow our process in place. By the time it gets to the big enforcement piece, the pool's removed and then the infraction solved. And so it ends up being a vicious circle. And that may be some indicator as to why the province has removed it, simply because of these inflatables, but I'm only speculating and have sharing just discussions I've had with planning on that item.
Okay.
and so then it becomes a whole lot of work on our end for nothing in the end. I mean, I think lots of people are concerned and upset with, the province changing these standards, as am I. But, looks like we don't have a whole lot of room to move. Unless we want to go down that road, and that's certainly.
It's almost impossible to prosecute.
Yeah.
And I agree with Councillor Chandra, yourself. It's horrific that they would take this off, but they've made it almost impossible for us to prosecute it.
Yeah. And I did read that, but hearing you say it sort of hits more of what the reality is, and
But council, you do have the ability to amend your zoning bylaw. I would say if you are looking at making any zoning bylaw amendment for the pools and hot tub piece, that you take a look at the zoning bylaw in itself, as you may love more than one amendment in with an amendment application. There is a $1,000 application fee for doing any zoning bylaw amendment. And when you're going through this level of process, it would be prudent to look at maybe encompassing more than just one specific item. And it is, you definitely are not wanting to make several amendments with the zoning. The zoning bylaw is outdated. It is something that at some point, whether through this term or definitely the next, that we really need to take a good look at that as to, and identify some of the gray areas you may need clarity for, or changing some specifics, even changing some land use designations, right? So, and I mean, not that it's relevant here in Winnipeg Beach, but an example of what I mean when land use is tiny homes. So right now, our zoning bylaw will have, and I believe it's 800 square feet minimum, just off the top of my head, that seems to be the general consensus. So when you look at that's one of the challenges many municipalities have had, is that tiny homes are 400 square feet, and they're not meeting the requirements of their zoning bylaw. But you can, at that point, when you're making amendments, look at saying, what's ideal for where, and change land use designations, and then add additional parameters. So you do always have the option of amending the zoning bylaw.
So could we maybe table this until such time that we may be looking at the zoning bylaw and give this some consideration if we're looking at anything else that we're changing in it?
But in the meantime, are we looking at having the recommendation? EIPD is asking for council decision.
Councillor.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned. I mean, having a recommendation rather than having, hard lines. I don't want to have the death of a child on my shoulders. So I feel, it's our responsibility, and maybe I'm wrong, but that we need to make sure that the people understand, so whether that be, whatever we need to do to put that in place, like fencing and all this. So whether it's a soft pool or a hard pool, this scares me. Yeah, it might be more work, but and again, for enforcement and everything else, but I think it's something we need to look at.
Well, certainly, and so as Sharon is saying, that means we should probably review our whole zoning bylaw and see if there's any other changes, because it is quite a process.
Yep.
And so I think that we're all in agreement of doing that, but that means that we have to review our zoning bylaw.
So in the interim, would the I can look at creating the resolution of, be it resolved, council at this time is choosing option 2 to provide recommendations to property owners on certain safety measures, and list the verbiage that they have outlined in their letter until such time the zoning bylaw is reviewed, wherein amendments may be enforced.
The other piece that was, that I raised at the last meeting with regard to the feedback to EIPD is that if the recommendations could also make reference to checking with your local.
I can't encourage that, Councillor Gendron, because I have no other information. So if the recommendations is the EIPD is giving recommendations of the pools, check with your local facility. What other information am I providing?
Right now, nothing. But if they're putting this, if they're doing this, so if they're doing this pamphlet.
Yes.
And in 6 months from now, we change our zoning bylaw.
EIPD follows the zoning bylaw, and therefore they look after the enforcement, like they look after the parameters and ensure that.
Okay,
That's
sorry, I was
required,
missing
yeah.
that piece. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Good then.
So maybe not for this Wednesday's meeting, but for the meeting 2 weeks hence.
In March.
In March,
Put
could we have a zoning bylaw on that agenda, please? And that'll give time between now and the end of March to,
That is a big,
is it a big bylaw?
well, yeah. Yes, it is.
And that's not gonna be for initial discussion, that's gonna have people to start reviewing it.
So what we'll look at doing as council's aware, and that's very similar why everyone's received a copy of that 2007 rec plan, is again, just for future documentation, we are starting that strat binder. And so if you do want separate dividers, please bring your binders back, and administration will put those separate pieces in. What we will do is look at printing out the zoning bylaws for council, and then you can have those
Start reviewing it.
in the binder.
With regards to tiny homes, there was something, Barry, do you remember it? At previous council, and it had to do with the fact that our minimum size was 800 square feet. There was something that was brought forward to council by, I don't know whether it was a builder or the Tiny Homes Association, and there was some discussion around, yes, we would look at possibly changing our bylaw to consider tiny homes, so there might be some information.
Well, at this point, there's no legislation for that, so and not that I can't respect looking at what previous conversations were, but it is about moving forward. When we look at tiny homes, I do caution councils to be very specific and designate areas like under residential, like no different than any other developments that happen even in Winnipeg. You can set certain parameters to those developments where homes may have to be larger, may have to have this level of motif, have to have like certain roof structures. Leaving it wide open, it was not a recommendation that I would bring forward to council, simply because having a 3,000 square foot home next to a 400 square foot home, the aesthetics of the community, it's challenging. And I think that if you're looking at tiny homes, you would want to be looking at designating certain areas. And when we look at it, even from a cottage perspective, there are several small cottages that are already in existence. And you may say, you know what, this fits the motif of these particular streets or this particular area. But I would definitely caution against just leaving it free for all throughout the entire community, and you set designated areas that, though in that zoning area, it's permitted.
It was, just to clarify, it was information on sizing and sort of what, I'm sorry.
Sizing.
It was information on sizing and, this is what tiny homes are, this is how it can benefit your community. And so it was that kind of information.
Okay.
So it was just information on tiny homes for us sort of being able to look at, okay, what are we looking at as far as what it would be trying to fit into an existing area.
Okay, so would this resolution suffice, council? Be it hereby resolved that the town of the town of Winnipeg Beach, the town of Winnipeg Beach does not implement zoning bylaw changes at this time and recommends EIPD and chooses EIPD to provide the recommendations to property owners on certain safety measures until such time as a zoning bylaw amendment application has been submitted.
Correct.
So that way, if if it takes some time to get the application together, they can still move forward to provide these recommendations. Okay, may I have a mover, please?
Councillor Jarvis. And the seconder, please. Councillor Gendron. All in favor? Carried.
Okay. Be it hereby resolved that council moves in camera at 10:39 a.m. to discuss matters that are in the preliminary stages, and be it further resolved that any matters discussed while in camera be held confidential until such time as discussed in open council.
Just give me minutes. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Gendron. All in favor? Carried. We take a 10-minute break.
We just got a blurt through that April 1st.
Larry?
One moment.
We're still
We're still on.
Sorry.
Thank you, Jody.
You're like ready now?
We're out.
Okay. All right, you're back on.
Be it hereby resolved that council moves out of camera at 12:04 PM and resumes the special meeting of council.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Kozlowski. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Jarvis. All in favor? Carried.
Be it hereby resolved the special meeting of council held March 11th, 2024 be adjourned at 12:04 PM.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Jarvis. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Gendron. All in favor?